Deviation from the Mean, written by John Galt. I need to know you understand what I have told you. John stared at a little glass ballfin on the doctor's desk. It was a kind of trinket that looked both expensive and cheap at the same time, scattering little rainbows from a blade of light that sliced through the partially open blinds. John, cancer. The kind you don't get better from 6 months. I understand, Doc. This is not the place to feel things. This was the kind of situation that made you say poorly thought-out words, to confess and incriminate. He discreetly checked his pockets, tapping each time. Wallet, phone, keys, cloth. That done, he rose from the chair, fixed the lenses up properly onto his nose, and offered a hand. Thank you for telling me. Is that everything? The doctor ran his fingers along the fold of the letter, leaving John's hand to hover in place. His eyes were sharp, but John was very good at his default pleasant smile. He had a lot of practice. It was the sort of face that made comfortable conversations short. There are other things we need to discuss. I have other engagements, John said. The doctor glanced at John's waiting hand and offered a letter to him, willfully misinterpreting the offer. John held the letter, running his fingers along the folds as always. Reception areas, elevators, lobbies, and car parks passed around him. He can add this letter to his collection of life-ending newsletters, rejections, court dates, police reports. His thumb dragged along the seam, folding in the crease perfectly flat, as he stood in the middle of the road, looking around at hundreds of cars. He'd forgotten where he'd parked, and seemingly had no memory of the event at all. His ears drummed, skin prickled. His eyes flicked down to the letter to see it spark, little flits of light jumping between the paper and his fingertips. He dropped the letter, but the sparks persisted. Light splashed, and he was out. The letter remained in the middle of the road, thrown a few paces from a gust of wind, then sitting perfectly still in the quiet, pleasant afternoon. John sat back, sprawled across the plastic chair that flexed concerningly under his weight. His mouth contained an acrid taste of sleep that his tongue needed to polish off each tooth to dislodge the flavor. His eyes took the time to adjust to the intense lights above until he could see a glint on the table in front of him. He sat up and reached out, bringing the little wireframe glasses back up onto his nose. He was in an interview room, square, waterproof, a window to unfamiliar computers. Lots of cabling and no adapters he was familiar with. No Ethernet or serial ports, as though someone had reinvented wiring from the ground up. The chair was too short, and the only doorway was small and narrow too, with unfamiliar symbols on a hexagonal keypad. His first thought was interrogation cell, but different. The windows were two-way, and the hexpad had shapes instead of Arabic numerals. Whichever it was, he had a slew of solid alibis. Cameras would show that he went to his local deli at the time, considered buying milk but ultimately made no purchase before leaving. The counter attendant did not see him, but the footage existed, indistinguishable, even to any experts they may find. He polished his glasses, running over the different alibis and the various incidents they proved they were unrelated to himself. Dates, times, and places far away from whatever they were investigating. He had planned and prepared for this. He tapped his pockets to find his wallet and cloth, but no phone or keys. At least it was not in manacles, but he wasn't sure how long that would last. The door and the walls around it were transparent. There was a room beyond that connected to both his interrogation room and the observation station with computers. It had another door on the far end. It opened, revealing something he hadn't planned for. Short blue figures with white clothes. He put his glasses on to see strange, lean people walking into the room. They were not detectives. Their skin was varying shades between teal and seafoam green. No hair. They had little tendrils sticked back from their scalp. They looked mostly human, like budget alien extras that could be mocked up by a bit of makeup and latex. He was offered polite smiles, and so he returned the expression that he practiced so well. One individual couldn't take her eyes off him. She was subordinate to the others, bowing and nodding, speaking only when they spoke to her. He couldn't read her lips. They moved strangely, and she was not speaking words he understood. A senior of the species reprimanded her, and she cast her eyes low in apology. Then her spirits flooded up to booming again at his words. She stepped towards the door of the interrogation room and punched in 4 shapes into a keypad. Middle, high, high, low was the best he could see. There had to be more complex code to get out. The door opened with a whomp of air, negative pressurized. She was practically jumping out of her skin with excitement and ran fingers to settle a tendril past the strangely shaped folds in her ear. "Can you understand me?" she said. Yes. I understand you quite well. Please take a seat," John said, while extending a hand to the chair opposite. She shot him smiles between settling down a tablet and adjusting her little plastic seat to mirror him across the table. The others lingered around the screens in the observation room, chatting to each other as they went. "My name is Rithan Delalark, but that's probably difficult for a human to say. You can call me Sarah, if you prefer." "May I have— You like the name Sarah?" John asked. "Oh, yes. It's very similar to Graudetch, verb for dancing," she said. Her eyes were bright. There was absolutely no filter between what she felt and what her face presented. With a button press, a short clearing of her throat, and it was broadcast into the room. Her tendrils bloomed a deeper blue, and she visibly cringed at the sound. She nodded partially to herself and flicked her attention back down to the tablet. "May I have your name?" "You're aliens. This is space." There was a delay between her words and the understanding of the observers. The signal had to be translated before they could hear. She stared at his pleasant smile for a second. Yes. You don't seem too concerned about that." "So long as we're not within 300 feet, I am not concerned about the location." Her tendrils flared and a squeaky laugh bubbled over to her. "Yes, that would be concerning as the speed, but are you comfortable knowing this?" It answers more questions than erases. It clarifies." "Clarifies," she said, a soft smile curling on her lips. She nodded and glanced at her notes before she continued. "You're quite adaptable. You are a signals technician, correct? You work with communications equipment. You live in a city, work regular hours, have no eccentric hobbies. Other than your mildly defective eyesight, there are no signs of aberration from the normal." "Just a regular, normal guy," said John. "Center of the disruption. How familiar are you with science?" she said. "You want to control a standard to measure aberrant behavior," John said. "Yes. Oh, talking to you is much easier than I could have hoped." The researchers appeared unharmed and disinterested. "This is a clandestine operation." "Clandestine?"
"Secretive. You are not associated with any law enforcement."
"A human organization?" "Oh, no, not at all. Is that okay?" John nodded. She scrolled through the tab for a moment, her eyes bored into the next question before lifting it up to him. She took a step to calm herself. The smile left the corners of her eyes, and for the first time she wore a mask of false emotion as she spoke. She was unaccustomed to lying on command. "We'll just run a few tests, nothing invasive, a few activities and questions, and at the end of it all, we'll be returned unharmed with precious metals." John dialed his pleasant smile up to an 8 and rose from his chair, reaching across the table to pluck the stylus from her fingers.
"Precious metals. I'll be a rich man," he said.
The spike was rigid, sharp, and heavy. Her eyes flicked from his face down to the stylus and back up. He nodded again.
"Splendid."
"Splendid," she said. The metal didn't flex against his thumbs, and when he tested it,
"Splendid."
Her smile faltered. Confusion flitted between her eyes. She glanced down at her notes and tapped away, writing something into a document. Her eyes lingered on his smile and then ran up the corner of her eyes, her face no longer mirroring his as her pulse started to quicken.
"You're faster than most, which is surprising," John said.
"Thank you."
"That's not a good thing. I'm going to ask you a question, and I'd like you to answer me very quickly. Do you understand?"
Her bright exuberance was gone, replaced with cautious curiosity. Her gaze lifted from the 8 out of 10 pleasant smile and locked onto his. She didn't look away, but it seemed like she wanted to. With a deeper breath, she gave a nod.
"What is the code to the door?"
"What?" John rose from his seat, keeping his movements loose, his expression gentle. The spike twirled about his fingers in a tight fist, the only knot of tension on his body. He stepped around the table towards her. "Square, circle, circle, triangle," she said quickly. Her hands clung tightly to the tablet, lifting it like a shield between them.
"Seriously?"
said John. He looked up to the unaware observers. The translation still hadn't reached them, but they seemed only mildly curious at him standing up. John punched in the code and stepped out into the activity room, feeling the rush of clean air when the door unsealed. The researchers stood up from their desks, wheeling out cameras and other recording equipment, tracking him as he went. He walked down a series of activity tubes with blocks and puzzles, little IQ tests, maths questions abstracted into dots and symbols. A genuine snort of amusement broke through his polite mask. At the end of the line was a table large enough for him to lie down on, with a room and drain in the middle. "Just for my notes, was there an implied threat when you asked me for the code?" said Sarah.
"Yes."
There was a series of 4 beeps at the door, and another alien stepped into the room. 5 feet, more built than the others. Baton in his hip, radio and a vest that looked designed to deflect small arms fire away from his heart. Assuming their heart was in the same place. There was no reason to believe the heart wasn't there. "Do you feel less agitated now that you're in a larger room?" said Sarah.
"Yes, there is much more space out here."
Sarah jogged along to keep up, her tablet in one hand, her other held up to try and get her superiors to keep their distance. She followed him up towards the guard and slowed, keying in observations into the document. John smiled at the guard, who mirrored his gesture. He said something in her words, rumbling, rolling vowels, and a hand shrugged at his side. "Is the ship's guard making you feel uneasy?" said Sarah. Guard, singular.
"Not at all."
The stylus punched a series of small, deep holes running up the creature's side. His fingers gripped the vest tightly, wrenching him around across John's outstretched leg to stumble a few panicked spaces. Meanwhile, John's fist impacted flesh over and over, running up the base of the guard's jaw. Blue copper-tasting blood sprayed back out with each blow until the hand that dragged the guard was no longer needed to control. John let the body drop to the floor and crouched down, slipping the solid baton out of the little plastic holder on the body's hip. Sarah crashed into a table as she stumbled back, tablet held firm in both hands, thumbs tapping away. John turned to her superiors, rod in one hand, spike in the other, herding them back into the observation room, into an ever smaller space where they clambered over the top of each other. He couldn't understand the exact meaning of their words, only the tone of the screeching that began to deafen him. Their hearts were in the same place, which was a pleasant surprise, protected by bands of constricting muscle and sinew in lieu of ribs. Their blood was under high pressure, spraying rather than gushing, turning to a mist where they should have been simply bruised. Their fewer bones were less rigid in proportion to their smaller stature, and it didn't take as many strikes as he expected to bring the room back down to silence. The only sound was a single set of lungs panting wildly, and the faded ringing in his ears. Sarah stared at a screen, tapping away as fast as her fingers could manage. John stepped around the mess, weaving between overturned chairs, to lean back against the autopsy table. He drew down his glasses, reverting her to a formless blob as he polished the blue off his lenses.
"What are you doing?"
said John. "Taking notes so that we can find out what happened."
"Read them back to me. I'll know if you lie."
She started running her thumb down the screen. "Specimen name
"From the guard,"
said John. "But the specimen punch stabbed. It stabbed the guard, bleeding out. Specimen, I'm sorry, I don't know a translation for this word. When you smile because you are encouraging an honest reaction, an interviewer." John fixed the glasses back up onto his nose.
I did, didn't I? Skip to the end. What is the last thing you wrote?"
"He was dexterous.
No messages home. No final notes to loved ones. I admire your dedication."
"Have you killed before?" she asked. A snort of amusement found its way past his mask. Apparently, he was still being interviewed.
"Oh, I don't think I should answer such a—" "Yes, I have," said John. He took in a deep breath and let it out. 82 kills. That does feel good to say."
Sarah glanced at a few bodies and made it out of the observation room.
"Those don't count. 82 humans."
"Were these state-sponsored kills part of a previous employment?"
"Quite the opposite. How many aliens are on the ship?"
9 senior researchers, 44 assistants, and 102 clerks. "But why do you kill your own kind?" she said.
John nodded to the activity tables. "You have games, little challenges to see who's better. Is there more pure game than this to find the best?"
said John while splaying his arms wide, weapons hanging loosely from his fingers. His eyes flicked down to her tablet.
"You can write that down."
She tapped away, her fingers hesitating by a backspace, but deciding against it, leaving messy half-typed words for someone else to piece together after the fact. "We thought that you were normal."
"Far from it,"
said John. He brought his weight forward, bouncing off the bench and stepping to the last few paces to where Sarah had backed herself up into a corner. He crouched down. Her fingers blitzed faster and faster, getting her final thoughts into text as quickly as she could. John tilted his head down until his face entered her view. The moment her eyes met his, she was caught. The tapping petered off, and her head craned back to follow him. The room switched to emergency lighting of dull red, highlighting everything in crimson or black. He let out a fake smile finally fall off his face. His mask slipped away to reveal nothing at all.
"Tell me, Sarah, what do you see?"
She tried, but she couldn't get words past the knot in her throat. It didn't matter. He could see the change in her eyes, her pulse quickening up the arteries wrapped around the trapped breath. There was no filter between what she felt and what she showed. For the first time, he had an honest, clean surface to see his reflection. "Hello, Sarah. My name is John. I am pleased for you to meet me. If you keep up and don't give away the game, I'll answer your questions." End of story. I'd greatly like to thank our Tier 5 channel members, Casper Arnholt, John Creighton, Manatharia, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.